So we are starting with the prayer.
भेद भाव अपने दिल से साफ कर सके, दोस्तों से भूल हो तो माफ कर सके, झूठ से बचे रहे, सच कदम भरे, खुद को जय करे, हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मुश्किलें पड़े तो हम पर हित न कर्म कर, साथ दे तो धर्म का, चले तो धर्म पर, खुद पे हौसला रहे, बदी से ना डरे, दूसरों की जय से पहले खुद को जय करे, हमको मन की शक्ति देना.
Good morning. Giving tribute to our master Samuel Hahnemann, who have found this divine science for all of us and make us dare to be wise to heal the suffering. With the blessings of our Guru Dr. Prafull Vijayakar sirs, who have preached this modern science with the homeopathy and made homeopathy easy like mathematics. Jai Hanuman, Jai Homeopathy, Om Vijayakaraya Namaha. So, as far as we are in the learning and reading of the books in the journey from the first aphorism to this, so today we are dealing with one of the aphorism from the Organon of Medicines. Aphorism number 34. Up till now we have covered 33 aphorism. So aphorism number 34. The greater strength of the artificial disease produced by medicine is, however, not the sole cause of their power to cure the natural disease. In order that they may effect a cure, it is before all things requisite that they should be capable of producing in human body an artificial disease as similar as possible to the disease to be cured, which with somewhat increased power transform to a very similar morbid state an instinctive life principle, which in itself is incapable of any reflections or act of memory. It is not only obscure but extinguish and thereby annihilate the derangement caused by the natural disease. This is so true that no previously existing disease can be cured even by the nature herself. By the accession of a new dissimilar disease, be it ever so strong, and just as little can it be cured by medical treatment with the drugs which are incapable of producing a similar morbid condition in the healthy body. So this is what Master Hahnemann is telling, that The medicine has a power and it produces the similar symptoms similar to the natural disease and in hence it is power to cure the same. This is what the things it was written in aphorism number 34. Now we are moving ahead to this book, The Homeopathy and Modern Science. Up till now, we have connected a lot of the science with the homeopathy. That is called as we applied the physiology into this. We applied the embryology with the homeopathy. We applied the endocrinology with the homeopathy. We applied the vaccines and vaccinosis with the homeopathy. We also applied the importance of the immunology with the homeopathy. So it is the allied science. Now, today we are going to deal with the homeopathic science and how we have to learn the repertory. So today we are learning how to utilize repertory in a scientific way. So starting with the chapter 9, repertory. As you all know, the repertory is a tool which is preferably used by each and every homeopath to arrive at the simillimum without mistakes. So this is what the best tool to be applied in our practice, and that is why we have to study the repertory. We have to understand the repertory and how we have to get the GCS for our patients from the repertory. So we have to learn the repertory in depth. So today we are studying this in a different way and understand how it is. So there are many ways of studying repertory to make a full use of this wonderful instrument at our disposal. We need to look at the various way in which repertory can be used. So repertory used to solve the cases which most of us do. It can also be applied for the study of materia medica, a much better and interesting way of studying our remedies, whether singly or in the group. How do we do this? Well, here is how. Pick up a repertory and just go through the different rubric. What do you find? You find some rubric that it is. Look again and you will find that. See, most of time we understand the Kantian approach, and the approach is to understand the mind first and then the body. Okay, so we have to look into the considerations of the mind rubric, and by reading the repertory, we find some rubric like this, some rubric like this. So we have to understand how to categorize the repertory in such a way. So some of them are the expressive rubric, and while some of are them the non-expressive rubric. So this represented the expressive rubrics is the genetic expressions of the particular persons at the mental, physical level. Non-expressive rubrics gives a genetic non-expressions of the particular persons or individual. So what is expressive? This covers those rubrics which represent the expressive symptoms in the repertory and will be helpful in tackling the expressive patients that we called as extroverted. So the quality like vivaciousness, loquacity, shrieking, lamenting. So these are the expressions of that particular individual. While the non-expressive persons, this covers those rubrics which represent those patients who either don't talk or communicate very little. So in the initial days of our practice, most of time what happened, we used to understand the patients by asking the patient many questions, and suddenly we found that patient is not talking, so we are in a situation of stuck that how can we get the medicine for this patient? But this is what you have to understand. The non-expression also is the kind of the patient's behavior, uh, and that guide us a certain process that it is the rubric for there are. reserve, talk indisposed to, grief undemonstrative, anger suppressed, and a quiet disposition. So this is also help us to understand the man from this perspective. Again, we have to look back into repertory. So we find that some rubrics are the objective rubrics and some rubrics are the subjective rubrics. I do not go into detail of this objective and subjective because all know that objective is a sign and which can be observed, felt, touched by our senses, and it is a definite and cannot be denied. While the subjective is those the patient experience, and but we cannot see it, we cannot measure it, we cannot sense it. It is the patient's perspective, and these are the relative symptoms which cannot be measured or confirmed. So many a time we are into process that we have to give more importance to the objective symptoms because this is a confirmed and cannot be deniable. While sometimes the patient is telling, but if the patient is telling a short subjective feelings, subjective symptoms, and their experience, that has to be counted into consideration. So, as far as we have learned in the aphorism number 6, unprejudiced observer aphorism, it was written that when you are into taking into considerations of the history, the first thing you have to understand that what patient feels, what patient has subjective symptoms, the second what the relatives and attendant observe, and the third the physician's observation. So this is what the objective and subjective symptoms. So whenever we are looking into patients and the rubrics, the objective rubrics are there is a hardness, so we can feel it, we can see it, we can sense it. There is a frown, dispositions. Most of time I used to take this frown disposition in acute conditions where the patient having a distress when there is acute condition, and that is helping me in my clinical practice. So I used to take frown disposed to rubric, and out of that I prescribe a remedy in especially in acute cases. So this is the confirmed objective symptoms. Restlessness physical very important because also it is genetically governed that this is what the restlessness is, the restlessness at the level of particular cells or the body part. So you have to take into considerations that the person is sitting in front of you and moving his legs, moving his hands, and there is a finger rigidity. So this is the automatic behaviors of the genetic expression. So looking into consideration, this is a very obvious and objective in nature. Swelling and discolorations, you can see it, you can feel it, and that is what the very short that you take into consideration. So most of time you have seen the remedies like apis mellifica, the swelling and bag-like swelling over the eyelids. There is a calica, there is a phosphorus. So this is what the PQRS of that particular remedy. The same way when the patient comes to with the same symptoms, you can think of that remedies. So this is the objective symptoms. While the subjective symptoms refer to the person's feeling, we cannot measure that. That is what the pain, the grief, the indignations, the vision, certain perceptions with persons having a delusions, sensitivity, dreams, cravings and aversions, and modality. Again, if the patient is telling each and everything in a very particular and a precise way with a striking symptoms, then consider this as the entry point in your cases. So for example, I will say a physical example of the cravings, that the cravings for the undigestible things, that is something which is PQRS to particular individuals. Barring certain conditions like in a pregnancy, many of the women having that desire to eat the ficas and everything because of low calcium level. But still, it is PQRS for particular state. So that has to be counted into it. When we look back into another aspect of the repertory, so this is what we have found that the first is expression and non-expressive rubric. Second, we found that the objective and subjective rubric. When we back into repertory and reading the rubric, so we can found that some rubric reflect the intellect of the male, while the other rubric reflect the emotion of that particular individual. So we have categorized that these are the intellectual rubric, these are the emotional rubrics, and that will help you understanding the man as a whole. So those which tells us about the thinking capacity, the thought process, the intelligence are the intellectual rubric like the intellectual, the conscientiousness, the positive, cowardice, idiocy, imbecility, concentration difficult, comprehension easy. So these are the rubrics which we think of when we are thinking that these are the intellectual peoples or dull intellectual peoples. While the emotional, that the emotions, those which tells us about the sentimentality of the persons. So emotions gives rise to two things. One is the sensitivity and another is a reaction to particular emotions. So the reactions also guide us that this individual is emotionally this one. Again, what Sir has mentioned that the sensitivity belongs to the constitution while the reactions belongs to the miasm. So according to the miasmatic aspect, the one persons can react in a different form. In a sora, it react in a different, in a psychosis, it react in a different, and in a syphilis, it react in different. So we have emotions like the sentimental, grief, sympathy, affectionate, anger, rage, jealousy. These are the emotions taken into consideration. So when we are looking into repertory, we see this. Some rubric represent that they are the causative factor, and some rubric represent they are the resultant effect. So according to that also we have to understand the sensitivity and the effect. So cause and effect phenomena. So in causative factors, the factor which lead to the series of reactions in a person's psyche or the physics. If we can get a definite causative factor, then it assume a lot of significance. So most of time what Master Hahnemann is telling in aphorism number 5, that in acute case you have to find out the exciting cause, in chronic case you need to find out the fundamental cause along with the whole constitutions and moral melodies and everything. So in causative factor we have a mental cause like a ailment from admonition, anger, suppressed grief, and the physical vaccinations or certain medications that are found into the causative factor, whereas the resultant effect, so some of the rubric which is the consequence of the causative factors. This depend on the particular sensitivity of that individual and affect those part of the body which are weak or prone to affections. Unless and until it is not weak, it is not affected. This tells us the fear of actions in that person's both mental and physical. For example, a slight emotion gives rise to weeping, a sensitive to criticism. Weep cannot, even though he has a grief, and the convulsion after vaccination. So these all are the resultant effect. When we go back to the repertory, we found that the some rubrics related to disease symptoms, where are some rubric which is related to non-disease symptoms or the natural trait. So most of time, the natural trait gives rise to a genetic attribute of the patient, and that will guide us to prescribe a GCS. So disease symptoms, these symptoms are resulting out of some disease or the pathology or affections. These are helpful to arrive at a diagnosis, but for a homeopathic prescription point of view, it has a lesser value. Sometimes we have to consider that the disease is the affinity. So our medicine has to have the affinity of that particular disease to be cured. So, for example, there are rubric like the imbecility, tumors, sunstroke, the mania, the sadness and depression, the cachexia and emaciation. It are the disease symptoms. But when this disease symptoms is accountable to a particular things, which is very important that it has a power to the medicine has the power to penetrate at a deep level. For example, if we look at the emaciation rubric, the emaciation general gives rise to a wasting of the muscles of the particular bodies. Okay, the constitution which goes into emaciations. But when we look into the particular of the emaciations, like the emaciation particularly in the neck regions, emaciation particularly in the lower limb, emaciation particularly in the buttocks region, emaciation particularly in the deltoid region, emaciation particularly in the thigh region. So this gives rise to a PQRS of the individuals. Some rubrics are the known disease trait, like these are the natural attribute of the persons arising out of his genetic makeup, and these are the tremendous significant for the homeopathic prescriptions. For example, in each and every condition, the persons may become pessimist. Even in a crisis, the person becomes showing courageous. The person is very audacity, a lean people, a tall people, a stoop shoulder people at the physical level. So this is giving rise to a non-disease trait of the persons. So by looking into repertory, we need to find out that the disease symptoms or the non-disease symptoms. Again, there are some rubric which are very obvious to see, and there are some rubric which are very concealed. So to find out the obvious rubric, it is very similar to the objective symptoms mentioned above. These are the features which cannot be argued as everyone is able to see them clearly. So most of time we have to observe, and this gives obvious symptoms. Hence have to be given a lot of value and should be used as a eliminating rubric, like the persons having a foppish behavior, persons having a cleanliness, persons having a loquacity, very talkative in your clinic. When you look into patient, the persons look very dirty. When the person came to your clinic, he is in a haste and hurry. So these all are the obvious symptoms. Even person cannot talk in front of you or remain quiet. It is also obvious symptoms that looking into considerations. While the concealed symptoms, this test the skill of the homeopath in case taking. So to get the symptoms out of an individual require a lot of patience and an art of case taking. Again, with the good observation is the key features in this. There are those quality of the person which he tries to cover or justify. So we have to understand that the person is a hypocritical, a person is dogmatic, a person is deceitful, a person is liar, jealous, or many things. So these are the symptoms which are concealed from the patient. So it is a tricky questions or the case taking is the art by the physicians, so that can understood that this is the quality of the persons and it is concealed from this. Now, as we have understood that the repertory is divided into many facets, and the rubric which was written in the repertory in many facets is a subjective, objective, obvious, concealed. There is expressive symptoms, there is a non-expressive symptoms. So this guide us that we have to look everything from the patient perspective. Now, what is the practical aspect of the repertory? Once we know that this basic structure of the repertory, we move further to the more practical aspect of repertory, selecting the right rubric and arriving at the right remedy. So this is what the repertory is. Just when we applied repertory by a mechanical purpose, then the symptoms are given in the repertory. But when we apply the right perspective of the repertory, then and then we can reach to the right remedy. So all of us face most of time this problem that even after taking a very good case full of mental and physical symptoms, hope you all are agree, taking a good well thought out rubric, we just don't seem to hit the right remedy. Hope you all know that you all are facing the same things. Why it happens? So let us go with the example that happen in our clinics. So for example, there are three homeopaths A, B, C is working on one case. The case is like this. A patient come for the first time and as the case taking progress, they get frustrated to find out what he just answered the question to the point. Nothing more, nothing less. What do we do? The homeopath A is feeling like that he is not talking because he is reserved. I will take the reserve rubric. Clear? The another homeopath feels that he is not communicating because of his shyness. He is not comfortable with me at outset, so I will take shyness as the rubric. The another homeopath says he is definitely egoistic and that is why he is not talking. I should take haughty and egoistic rubric. So each of us end up in the taking a different rubric and we part away then there and obviously arrive at a different remedy. Then we say that all homeopaths arrive at a different remedy. Homeopathy is highly individualistic. This is not what is meant by individualistic. That is, all of us arrive at the individual level for the same individual. So I will give another example. One person tells me that she cannot tolerate her husband scolding her. She gets very upset and that affect her. So what one homeopath A feels that ailment from admonition aggravations, ailment from insult and indignation. The homeopath B says sensitive to reprimand, criticism, or offended easily. The another homeopath feels that injustice cannot tolerate or defiant. See how everyone differ in his or her own thinking. So this leads to all the confusions and the debate in homeopathy: who is right, who is wrong. Unless this is remedied, this inconsistency in homeopathy will persist, and the future for most homeopathy is dark and frustrating. They start believing the allopath who says that homeopathy is nothing but just a trial and error system. The correct use of remedy and the right approach toward using it will help us to overcome this nagging problem in the homeopathy. The incorrect approach or the selections of the rubric result either in failure or in a temporary short-lasting result, and then homeopathy is blamed. For a long-lasting result, especially in a chronic so-called incurable cases, pathological cases, the entire onus is on the kind of the rubric that we select. The symptoms on which we prescribe, therefore we need to select our prescriptive totality with utmost care, and this is exactly what Dr. Vijayakar is so good at. He picks up what runs through and through that individual and that in him which has not changed. There is a difference between the symptoms and the prescriptive symptoms. Herein lies the difference between the extraordinary prescriber and the master prescriber. So there is a proverb that winners don't do different things, they do things differently. So this is what we have to understand. The same apply to the homeopath, the ordinary prescriber, and the master prescriber. This is the quality that we at a predictive homeopathy want each of one of us to develop. Dr. Vijayakar uses the same repertory that we do. Okay, he never uses any extraordinary repertory for the purpose of prescriptions. He uses the same medicine that we do, but the difference lies in the know how and when, how and what, and just how would we tackle the first example case. It's simple. Doesn't everyone agree that the patient was talking less and to the point, which is simple term means that he is a person who is not interested in talking. So the simple rubric that no one can deny or rule out is a talk indisposed to. The person is the patient's remedy has to be covered this big rubric. So this is what we have to understand. So by looking and reading this, so what was the first lesson to learn in prescribing rightly and avoiding the guesswork being here? Take a rubric which is big and solid, which everyone has to agree on. It means it should be an objective rubric and not the subjective rubric. So that is what you have to understand. Take a big rubric and which is solid. Once we take such rubric, we are sure that at least we have definitely not eliminated the simillimum. The golden rule is try and eliminate the rubric that we have selected. Similarly, try and rule out the remedies that come up after repertorization. So when the rubric or the remedy cannot be ruled out or eliminated, then it assumes significance and solidarity. So this is what the golden rules tell us. Now, what to do? Next, we proceed by taking such quality of that person which runs through and through his personality in various situations or circumstances and in the childhood, youth, and adulthood. Again, bearing in mind that they have to be solid and beyond doubt. What are those qualities of the persons which are unshakable or which describe him as a person? These are his innate characteristic or trait. For example, these are the few examples which we have to take into consideration. So the conscientiousness, the mildness, the positiveness, the exuberance, the courageousness, the cowardice, unfeeling and hard-hearted. Why are these given so much value? The reason is these are the characters which are determined by the genetic makeup of an individual. How do genes determine the nature of the persons? Well, as a matter of the fact, genes are responsible for nearly all that we see and as an individual. The genetic makeup of the persons remain the same throughout his life, which he has inherited at the time of conception. Out of all the genes available to men, some are expressed while some are repressed, not expressed. The expressed genes determine not only his physical makeup but also what the disease is prone to develop and also his nature and intellect. In short, they determine the constitutions of the person. So what we are taking as prescriptive totality to arrive at the simillimum is nothing but the totality of the express and the dominant genes in that individual. Hence, the term rightly coined by Dr. Vijayakar is genetic constitutional simillimum. We should take those quality of the persons into consideration which don't leave that persons with a change in circumstances. The features determined by the genes always resist changes. For example, a timid person will nearly always remain timid, through though we may witness a few occasional incidents which, if seen on the face value, may appear to be some of the courage. A person is not courageous, conscientious if he remains so when all things are going for him. It is trying the situation that one's conscience is tested. These are the things which will not change overnight. These are the subject to change only when there is a major positive factor. The genetics in men will always resist the change. The causative factor will be such as is analogous to his or her constitution. For example, only those people who are sensitive to grief will be found under the rubric element from grief. So so the way we look or read the rubric should change drastically. We should look at the rubric, for example, ailment from grief, the people who are prone to be affected by the grief. Ailment from vaccinations cover the constitution which are easily prone to get affected by the vaccinations. Anxiety, anticipations, and engagement, people who become very anxious before any engagement. So, if a strong causative factor plays a havoc in that individual and he turns from a courageous man to the coward personality, then this change in his phenotype will be most definitely found in related remedy of his earlier constitutions or either complementary or followed well by. Once we understand this, it becomes very simple to perceive the logic behind the relationship of the remedy. This answers our long debated questions of whether the constitution of man can change or not. We have to understand that in homeopathy, a symptoms assume importance if it represents him as a whole rather than the situation. For example, any man, irrespective of his caste, creed, age, sex, feels jealous at some point of time or the other, but a jealous person is one who feels his emotions many times and for trifling matters as well. Only then can he be labeled as jealous man. So the second lesson in the repertorizing case is to select a rubric which runs through and through that person's which has not changed over the year or that which resists the change. It means one that is genetic and an innate character of this person. This is usually from the non-disease group of rubric. So for that non-disease group, we have read the rubric. So we see in example 2 that is quite natural for any wife to get upset if her husband scold her, and therefore this reaction to the situation is quite normal and should not be given too much value. The given scenario does not warrant our much attention or the thought. For the selection of any rubric, we also need to be very well conversant with the cross reference of the rubric under consideration. Therefore, this exercise of compiling and putting together rubric which are similar in meaning but may mean or imply something slightly or grossly different can always come in a handy. So, for example, we have to categorize things and then take into rubric into consideration. So this is what we have to learn the repertory in this way. For example, if we considering the rubric of inferiority complex, so whenever the inferiority complex comes into your mind, there are the few rubrics comes into your thought. That is a lack of confidence, contemptuous of self, reproaches himself, timid and bashful people appear in public, they goes into inferiority. If the person's having a perception of diminish, they goes into inferiority complex. If the person's having the perceptions of the dirtiness, they goes into inferiority complex. The persons who feels that I am a failure or in future I will fail, they also goes into inferiority complex. And the persons who undertake nothing and otherwise he fail, they also goes into this inferiority complex. So this help us to understand the different rubric which otherwise we may miss out while solving a case of inferiority complex. What Dr. Vijayakar always says that the eye do not see what the mind does not perceive. Now, what our mind knows when we can inquire as to whether he is lacking in confidence or does he feel unfit or is he downgrading himself. So this is what we have to understand the person. Another example that for the people who are very rude and harsh who are the others. So to understand the behavior of that person, we have to look into consideration asking ourselves, is this person is contemptuous? Is this person having a rudeness? Is this person having a no manners? Is he insolent? Is having the behavior is abrupt and harsh? Is he is cursing or swearing? Is he abusive and insulting or impertinent in nature? So this quality of particular things makes the person rude and harsh. So you have to look into considerations. Another example, if we found the person is very lively and social, so we have to understand why he is lively. So is that person is very vivacious since childhood, a very sociability, exuberations, exhilarations, having a desire for a company, so he become lively, or having a verbal command of loquacity, so he become lively, having a mirth and hilarity or a cheerfulness. So this all gives rise to that this is representing the particular lively on social personality. So, from such a study, we can come to know the limitations of the remedy and become more comfortable with the repertory so that we can play around with the rubric rather than tense about it. For example, a big rubric like vivacious contain more than 100 remedies does not cover tenement, which is the only 3 marks remedy in rubric exuberance. So how is that justified? Sociability contains natrum carb as one of the medicines, which is one of our most misanthropic remedies. These limitations of our repertory can cost us our simillimum and hence our patience. This is exactly why the knowledge of repertory becomes so very important. Now, the third lessons in the repertory comes is our repertories are not perfect and we need to aware of the different flaws in them by knowing all cross reference of any particular rubric lest we miss out the remedy despite taking big and solid rubric. So learning materia medica from the rubric. So that is very important. We say that the persons which was very much natrum like and hence I prescribe him natrum mur. But here we forget that he has to be netramure and not just like netramure. This is what initial days what we are doing in our practice, and we made a mistake that I feel the patient is like calcarea. I feel the patient is like silicia. I feel the patient is like a netramure, and that is my feeling. So I prescribe netramure, but we'll end up with the failure. So we can understand that this feeling is not. If the person is netramure, then netramure will work. Otherwise, not. The latter means that the remedy that is demanded by the patient is the one which is similar to natrum but not the natrum. This is the line of the thinking that has to be set. We should try not to settle down with anything less than the simillimum. This is very important. In search of the simillimum, we should be very precise. It may not be possible every time, but at least our effort should be directed toward that end. So it is not hard and fast rule that in the first case taking you all get the right simillimum and you prescribe it. Even a senior most like me also having a difficulty in prescribing the remedy genetic constitutional remedy in the first visit also. So this is possible, but our effort toward this direction is very important that we need to look into consideration that exactly we need to prescribe the GCS for the patients and looking into consideration of the whole aspect. So at predictive homeopathy, we are trying to reduce, if not eliminate, the guesswork so long prevalent in homeopathic practice, like trial and error, as it is popularly known. So how can we do this? If we want to study a group of remedies, say for example, Kalis, it can be real tedious task as it is such a huge group, and as we study one remedy, we tend to forget the earlier one. So the best thing is to study them all together from the repertory instead of materia medica. Okay. So the understanding of the materia medica through the point of repertory, and then we have to extract that this remedy is like this. So if we take the main symptoms of the Kali, like anxiety, we find that the whereas most of the Kalis have very significant place in the sub-rubric of the anxiety, Kali bichromicum, the only Kali which is conspicuously absent under the anxiety consigns of, which immediately help us to understand and contrast between it and other Kali. So this is what very important understanding. We find all Kalis under indolence and the couple only under industrious, which tells us a lot about the Kali personality. Kalika, which is placed under industrious, covers another rubric which tells us a lot about the industrious and work desire for routine. So none of them is present under conscientious except causticum. If we study all the group in this fashion, our work would not only become much easier but also become very interesting. Don't you think so? So also we can study in a similar manner remedy which are egoistic or lively or technician or compare and contrast the remedy that comes under the same rubric. This method is most interesting and enjoyable way of studying repertory. In this way, take one big rubric and find out how remedy listed their score on different fronts in a comparison to each other. So, for example, we have to learn the haughty remedies, timid remedies, anxious or worrying remedies, conscientious remedies. So, in differentiating these remedies, we need to have a list of cross-reference rubric at our disposition. If we were to study the timid personality of our materia medica, then we may study them in the following manner. For example, the timid remedy. So timid, then combined with the coward. So we need to have a few remedies like a gelsemium, baryta, lycopus, silica, and stemony. But timid but not coward. So we have another remedy that is a strong remedy: the arsenic, carbon salt, alumina, coca, and natron salt. So this is what the exercise we have to do it with our practice. Timid and shy, bashful. So we have a pulsatilla, baryta, coca, petroleum, sulfur, and calcarea. But timid but not shy. like a gelsemium, kalicab, lyco, plumbum mat, sepia, borax, and arsenic alb. Timid and yielding and timid but not yielding. So these are the things which we have to look into considerations, that we have to combine two rubrics, two qualities, and then you have to cross-reference that this goes into this personality, this goes into this trait. So why this again, this books is giving you just an idea that how to study the repertory. It is not the things that it was written in that you have to look into this only, but this gives the idea. So this is what our practice make a man perfect. Another way studying the same rubric is to study the group of family. For example, timidity covers the carbons in a maximum percentage, followed by the sulfurs, kalis, arsenic, and metals. This help us to understand that the carbons are the most universally timid, followed by the sulfurs. If we study the repertory in a above mentioned manner, then we can realize the full potentials of not only the repertory but also our potential to a significant level. We will be able to do justice to our unused talent, reading to our practice and to our patient. It is very vast subject and require a lot of applications, perseverance and determinations conjoined with the passionate desire to prescribe better. A desire to come out of routinism or a drug picture fixed in our mind over a period of time, it is also required a lot of self-evaluations and criticism. Otherwise, we'll end up using the same group of rubric or the same group of remedies. So come, let's grow together. So this is what the repertory help us to understand in such a way, and we need to make it aware of this. So one of the things I will share with you is how to make the repertory, learn the rubric. So this is what I have done a little exercise and that help you to make you understand in a proper way. Suppose a patient comes to you with the quality of fastidiousness. So take a rubric from the repertory. The complete repertory has 43 remedy in the fastidious. Now to understand what is the fastidiousness, so difficult to please or shoot, delicate to fault, everything has to be just so, disdainful, squeamish, rejecting what is common and not very nice, suited with the difficulty. And there are a lot of remedies in that. Now, I advise all of you that you have to understand the man from the perspective of his group and the kingdom. So we have to understand that which remedy goes into fastidiousness. So there are a few plant remedy which goes into fastidiousness, like Nux vomica, pulsatilla, thuja, anacardium, conium. There are animal remedy which also goes into fastidiousness, like endocronus, sepia, lac remedies, bufurana. Bufurana is there in fastidiousness, never thought of. So this is what you have to understand. Then the minerals remedies like metals. So most of metals are very meticulous in their qualities. So they are there. So here the metals and minerals are most of there in the rubric fastidiousness. And then the nozzle. So this is what the gist of one rubric, that you have to go to the repertory and make a chart so you can differentiate this. So out of this, if you understand that the quality of the general public is like minerals, so we need to take the minerals out of it and which type of minerals is. So this is what we have to understand the repertory in this effort. Hope this is just the idea that I am sharing with all of you so you can get this in a proper way. So this is what we have completed the understanding of repertory, and tomorrow I will share with you last chapter of this book. In that we need to read and combine a certain quality of that book, and that will help you to understand that how this repertory will help us to understand the constitutions. So if you have any questions regarding this, you can ask me. We will have 5-7 minutes left, and from the 1st of February, we will starting with the study of the Mayasm and reading Sir's Mayasm books from the 1st of Feb. So I will reschedule all the meetings and sharing with you that links also in the group, so you can join from the 1st of Feb. Tomorrow we will conclude this book, Modern Science and Homeopathy, and there is a rest of 3 days or 4 days. We are taking a rest for this meeting, and from the 1st of February we will starting with the Modern Science and Homeopathy. Again, for understanding of these lectures, I had posted one lecture on understanding of the repertory. So here I am sharing with you a YouTube link in this group. So you can watch this, and you can understand the repertory, how to understand the repertory in a better way with a certain example which was given in the lectures. So you can go through this YouTube link and copy that link, so and save it for the later purpose so that you can read that lectures. Yes, as carcinosin develop fastidiousness because of the molding of dominations, but why bufo in the fastidiousness? Please explain. I don't know about the bufo in the fastidiousness exactly. I look into considerations reading the Bufo from the perspective. As we know, the Bufo is what we understand that the Buforana is what the mind does not grow, body grows. So that is a mentally very retarded persons, but their feeling is associated with the sexuality and having masturbation habits and everything. So fastidiousness is one of the psychotic rubric. That means the things which is there, which is not there, as Dr. Borkar sir says that in psychosis. So because of the dirty feeling associated with the guilt of sexuality, they might go into fastidiousness. But I don't know the exact answer of the why Bufo is there in fastidiousness, Dr. Nishan. But this is what I presume, and that is what the possibility of the explanation. Whereas you rightly said that carcinogens develop fastidiousness because of his strong domination and the molding. But fastidiousness comes out of the feeling that I should be a dirty somewhere. That is what I need to clean everything, and I need to become a very meticulous and fastidious. So this is what again another aspect of learning that so Bufo might be there because of some sexual guilt associated with the habit of masturbation. And even you know that Bufo is irresistible to do masturbations, and they are searching in a place of solitude to that do that. So that is very important. Any good book for there is no book available for reverse repetitions. You look into a certain software, even Akara, Zomeo can guide you to understand the reverse repetitions. And there are many softwares in the market that help you to understand the reverse repetition process. It is not just the reverse repetitions help you to understand the medicine. It is what you have to understand the certain quality to be combined in one facet so that you can understand this medicine is look like that. I will share one of the case. It is not time. Time is going again, so I will share it tomorrow. So it will help you that by looking this quality, the case of a PCOD which I had treated. And by looking that quality, you cannot thought that remedy. You thought many other remedy. But when I combine all the rubric and I see it, then I found that this remedy might be this. So this is what our understanding of the remedy are drug pictures from the Materia Medica or from the limited access of our Materia Medica. So we cannot understand the vastness of that remedy actions and remedy qualities. So that is what the repertory help us to understand a particular remedy. We'll share this case. Remind me that case of a PCOD with understanding. So I will share that case tomorrow. Any questions up till now? Thank you. So you can go through this link. Already I have uploaded the many of the lectures in my YouTube channel for learning more than 100 hours of learning. You can search Dr. Amit Gohel Satyam Homeopathy YouTube channel. So there is lot of knowledge of homeopathy shared in that channel. So thank you so much. And yes, I yesterday I forgot to share the approach of the that particular thing. So in acute, what to do in a chronic cases, what to do. So I will sharing the screenshot of that slides with all of you in group. Thank you for reminding, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for updating yourself and myself. And thank you helping me to update myself by waking early in the morning at 6 o'clock. So that will motivate me to share the knowledge. Thank you. Thank you so much. We will conclude our meeting today. Thanks a lot.